What's up, Western Oregon? Welcome to episode 5 of the TD show. You know, this time of the year, it can kind of get dark for sports. You're just paying attention to NBA trade rumors. You know, you lose baseball, softball season. It's a dark time sometimes, isn't it, Danny?
100%. I mean, I'm on SportsCenter trying to find anything interesting. I was watching X Games last night. I might watch this pickleball championship professional league. Who knows?
There's cornhole on.
It is truly a dark time for sports. I mean, there's just nothing going on.
But we thought it was. And then a former Oregon Duck pulled us out of those dark times, especially working in the world of Oregon sports. You know, we're wondering, how am I going to fill Danny's show? This guy's going to cut my time more than it already is. But then something truly special and remarkable happens over the weekend. A former Oregon Duck, a former Pac-12 champion under Casey Martin. His name is Wyndham Clark. He can now call himself a major champion. I mean, golfers work their entire lives just to be called it. Think about it. He beat out Rory McIlroy, a guy that hasn't done it since 2014, 9 years, almost a decade that he hasn't done it. Well, Wyndham Clark has done it. He is your U.S. Open champion down there in Los Angeles. How about that?
I mean, it is great news. Great for Oregon, great for the Pac-12. I mean, you know, Pac-12 has had some really
legends.
Legends. Phil Mickelson, Tiger Woods. Wyndham Clark, I mean, look, this is a huge year from him. You know, last May he won the Wells Fargo Championship, his first major tournament title, and now he wins the U.S. Open in L.A. He was talking how special it was. You know, he went in as the underdog. He kind of had that chip on his shoulder, kind of like an Adam Fugate kind of vibe, right? The underdog. And, I mean, he said it was special. He said it was in L.A., you know, he talked about how this, you know, his late mother, it really, carried him into this tournament. He was saying how there was people coming up to him showing pictures of his mom from when they lived in L.A. So he said that really helped him. You know, he knew that she was watching over him. And it was like a Hollywood fairy tale. I mean,
exactly.
Underdog, had this mentality, and then, you know, over Rory McIlroy, and it's just such a huge win for him.
Yeah, because he entered that final day, right, and it's just kind of a field of the sports legends, some upcoming legends. You had Scottie Scheffler, who's been playing out of his mind. I think they said a stat on air that he's finished in the top 10 in like his last 13 majors. Like that doesn't even make sense as a stat. That guy is unbelievable. Ricky Fowler still looking for his first career major.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been near the top of the sport for so long, and that gives you another idea of how hard it is to win one of these things. I mean, the pressure is at a peak. The entire time you've got to be thinking not only about the money, but about how this will go on your resume. I mean, when you look at a golfer's Wikipedia page, it has tournament wins, and then it lists the four majors and what's your best finish, you know?
Exactly.
And some guys, their best might be, you know, finishing ninth in the Masters one time, whatever. But Wyndham Clark joins an elite club. He's the first Oregon golfer to ever win a major championship. And, you know, there's been some pretty good golfers out of Oregon. Peter Jacobson's won, Aaron Wise, Ben Crane was around the block for quite a while. Wyndham Clark is the first. And like you touched on, so if you weren't aware, if you didn't hear this on the broadcast probably a bunch of times, but Wyndham Clark, his mother was really the one who helped get him into the game of golf. She was big into the sport. She passed away, sadly, from breast cancer in 2013. That was during a pivotal point of his life. That's when he kind of transferred to Oregon, was feeling a little lost, had to kind of rediscover his passion for golf. But her words kind of fueled him through that dark time. She always told him to play big. I mean, she was such a big force in his style of play. And, you know, and it's like, I feel like with a major championship or golf in general, managing emotions is probably the most difficult thing. You got to think about, you know, you got to tune out the crowd. You got to tune out the moment. And I just played golf last week, and it's like, I'm nervous just hitting every shot, you know, like out there playing 18, because I'm like every shot kind of matters. Like, I'm thinking too much. I couldn't imagine like playing a major championship and then having those emotions of being in LA, like you said, where his parents got married. His parents literally got married at a Los Angeles country club, Riviera, not the LA country club where they played, but all of that was swirling around in his head, and I feel like he didn't ignore it. Like, it was at the forefront of his mind all week long. He mentioned it after every single round that he was playing for his mom and dedicating it. So I think that's an extremely impressive athletic performance to not only do what he did athletically. I think about bogeying on 16. Like, I was watching with Hayden in the sports office, and it's like, oh boy, here it comes. You know, he's opening the door for Rory. But he comes back in par 17. That putt, that long putt on 18 was clutch cargo to get it, you know, right next to the cup. Kind of leave no doubt there with that long putt. But to not ignore the emotions, to actually use those emotions to fuel. I think, especially in golf, that makes this performance even more impressive, because sometimes emotions can be a downfall of a golfer in an event like this, I think.
100%. I mean, it's just like we said. I mean, it's a Hollywood story. I mean, it's powerful. I mean, seeing him hug his dad, and just, you know, seeing like the emotions coming. I mean, yeah, he let his emotions take it with him, but in a really positive way. So yeah, props to him, man.
And that I feel like that emotional outpouring of tears afterwards really resonated with everybody, because I think, you know, you have guys that have won it before, been to the mountain peak. You know, obviously it's going to be emotional for everyone, but there was something extra. Like, that was charged. That was a charged celebration. I feel like it gave everyone around the country some goosebumps. He was such a big underdog, like I said, going into a Shark Tank with some of the sport's very best athletes: Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, Ricky Fowler, and he was kind of the more anonymous one, right?
Yeah.
Out of those names. But we kind of knew him here in Oregon because he's a Pac-12 champion. We've been following him all year, and low-key, to your point, he's been very solid. He's put together a lot of top 10, top 15 finishes.
Yeah.
Took him kind of a little while to get over that hump of first PGA Tour win. I think once he got that at the Wells Fargo, like you said, he had another really good performance in a pairing tournament in New Orleans too, that I think was really big for him. And quietly this year, he reached another level. And he kind of said that. Entering this tournament, I felt like I can hang. You know, I feel like I've been solid all year long. This was the culmination of that. So congratulations to Wyndham Clark. Emotional story, an underdog story. Like you said, a perfect Hollywood ending, not too far away from Hollywood. 11 miles from where his parents got married. I mean, that's emotional stuff. And that's, I feel like, reminds us of why we love sports and why sports
100%.
matter. It's so much more about the results and the athletic achievement. It's about the storylines. It's about overcoming. It's about pushing the limits of, you know, what humans can accomplish. And for him to manage those emotions, I'm getting like almost emotional here, because like,
no, of course,
seeing him cry, like, I feel like everyone could kind of relate to that moment of elation, like the relief he must have felt of like that thing finally being over and just being able to tap in that putt.
Yeah.
Like, that literally is why we love sports. So congrats to him, a former Duck. I feel like everyone here pretty excited about that. We'll see if Aaron Wise, you know, can eventually kind of join him on that mountain peak. But I think, you know, in terms of big Oregon things to happen this year, there's been a lot. Like, there's been a lot of things lately. Baseball, softball, and volleyball. And after the break, concept that I've been thinking of for a while. Now that the academic year is kind of over, we're going to rank how we think the Oregon teams, a few of them, perform this year. I think it's a fun exercise. We're going to go all the way. You know, we're going to rank football, volleyball, baseball, softball. And I think what this does is gives us a state of the Oregon athletics program as a whole, which programs are overachieving, which ones are kind of meeting expectations, and then which ones I think some surprisingly aren't living up to expectations right now. So what do you think? We're going to put them in tiers, and we're going to see how this goes, and then we'll do Oregon State next week. So
let's do it.
Yeah. And if you disagree with us, let us know, but we'll be right back after the break. All right, welcome back to episode 5 of the TD Show. We thought this would be a fun exercise, kind of going through, now that the academic athletic year is all over, baseball, softball, kind of the last to finish up. Track and field finishing up at NCAA's in Austin. So we're going to kind of take stock of the Oregon athletics program in general, and rank these teams. I feel like, first of all, in general, kind of seemed like it would be a slightly disappointing year. Baseball and softball, we talked about a ton. We don't have to go into it a ton, but I feel like it seemed like they were limping to the finish line, and they ended up surprisingly good. So a strong finish, I think, by these Oregon athletic programs. So let's get into it. Yeah. We start with the S tier, and we'll put this on your screen. This is reserved for one team at the top of the top. No national champions in this group. We had an individual, but as a team, no national champions in this group for Oregon athletics. But we had a team come pretty close. And it was the volleyball team, a very special run to the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament.
100%. I mean, I feel like this Oregon volleyball team just gets better and better every year. I mean, you look at Brooke Nunaviller, Carson Bacon, and Matt Ulmer too as a coach. I feel like he's just, you see he got the contract extension, so obviously Oregon sees something in their head coach, and as they should. I mean, he's a great coach. He backs his players 100%, and they had one hell of a year. They had it was a 25-6 record. They had the best record in Pac-12 play, and I think quite a while. It was like 2012, 2013. They went 17-3. So they were just dominating from start to finish, and they made it to the Elite Eight. I mean, that is one impressive run for Oregon volleyball. And you know what? Like, props to them. They're a great team. I mean, I just feel like they're only going to get better and better because each time I watch them each year, I mean, they do get better and better. So
so if you take stock of them, they've made improvement. Yeah. They made it super far, kind of farther than any of these teams this academic calendar year. A special run to the Elite Eight. They had Brooke Nunaviller, the legend, and then they also have a bright future. Mimi Collar, Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. Just an absolute baller all year long. She was in my highlights every single time.
Yeah,
so she'll be back. They get some people back. Erin Slindy loves covering this program. She talks to Matt Ulmer all the time, and I trust her views. She's very high on this program right now as a former All Big 12 freshman volleyball player herself. So I trust her opinion, and it's hard to disagree. They're on top right now. Oregon volleyball. I don't know that I expected that at the season for Oregon volleyball to be sitting alone on the Oregon sports tiers in that S tier. Let's move to the A spot. Now, I think these were late pushes by this team. I think this list would have looked extremely different if we had made it in May or maybe April, but here we are, 2 super regional appearances by the Diamond Sports. They were one of only a handful of teams in the nation to make the super regionals in both baseball and softball. Huge testament to Missy Lombardi and Mark Wazakowski, or Mike Wazakowski, as you've called him, I've called him. But huge seasons for both of them. We've talked about it a lot, but real quick, what do you think about them kind of being alone in that A tier?
I mean, like you said, earlier, just a couple months back, we probably would have had them probably in this year D tier. They were kind of, like you said, limping to the finish line, struggling there. And then you look at both of them going on magical runs. You look at Oregon baseball, that 8-0 comeback. I mean, that is so magical. You saw how packed they were at PK Park. You look at softball, Missy Lombardi's making the first super regional since 2018. I mean, this was huge for both, like you said, Diamond Sports. Like I said, yes, was it kind of a bitter end for the season, but I think overall, same thing. They're just, the sky's the limit for them. So I think A tier solid. Like I said, super regionals very impressive. Only a select few teams make it that far.
Yeah, this is kind of the late comeback tier, and I feel like this A tier is sort of also the knocking on the door tier. I think both teams still have room for improvement. It feels like softball didn't have the offense to keep up with Oklahoma State, and then feels like baseball, the pitching challenges, well documented. They sit alone in that A tier. I'd qualify it, like I said, as the late comeback teams and also the knocking on the door. Pretty close to that 100%. S tier. It's just that volleyball made a Final 8 and they made a Final 16, but very close. So let's move on to the B tier. These are kind of interesting ones. This is the middle tier. Not sure we would have expected this. I would call it's the maybe slightly below expectations tier, or maybe they held serve, but let's go through it. So let's just start with football, and then we'll explain 100%. Track, because track we lumped in men and women's, but 2 very different stories, I think, for that team. But I think it's fair to lump them together, having the same coaching staff and the overlap there. So I don't think it's unfair to lump them together, but we'll talk about that. But let's start with football. My view on the season is that Dan Lanning held serve. I don't think it was a disappointing year. I don't think it was. I don't think they blew anyone away. It wasn't like Sonny Dykes' first year at TCU where they tore it up and made it to the playoff. So it's kind of like a B plus type year.
I would give him a B plus year. Like you said, it's first year head coach, right? Expectations are not that high, at least for me, at least. And you know what? They had some great wins. They had great wins over BYU, UCLA with College Game Day was a huge win. That comeback with Wazoo.
Crazy.
They had some great wins, but then you got to look at the flip side where you look at the Oregon State loss and the Washington loss. It's 2 rivalry games that you just cannot lose if you're Oregon. So, and you can call it whether it was like the play style or the coaching or whatever, but those 2 things, I think, is what sets them down to like the B tier, like you said. But I think B plus is very good for Dan Lanning for a first year. They're attacking the transfer portal this next year. I think overall B plus is a solid grade for them.
And it's an interesting season to consider because they seem like they could backdoor their way into the playoff, which seemed absolutely unfathomable after
that Georgia
that loss. I can never say that word. I don't know why. I always try to work it in like on air too, and I always struggle to say unfathomable. I need to just remove that from my lexicon. But the fact that they were in contention for a playoff for so long, and then also the fact that both of those games were very winnable.
Yeah.
Like this team was not far from being 11-1 and playing for a Pac-12 title. But for Dan Lanning to have his group ready to contend at least for a Pac-12 title without having his guys yet, I think it's a solid season. So we're in agreement there. Now track. This is probably the most complicated one to rate because on one hand, you have the women's team. They won another Pac-12 championship. They've won a ton of them in the last sort of decade. And for them to get back to the Pac-12 championship and win, and then have Jorinde Van Klinken win a national title.
Yeah.
And then have Izzy Thornton-Bott finish second in her event. Very solid season for the women. The men, I think it was a disappointment.
I think it was a disappointment.
On multiple levels.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, they lost a couple of guys over the years that were really carrying that program. So, I mean, yeah, it's, they got a lot of new faces, got a lot of guys that are just, it was a disappointment season, but it is what it is. But like we said, going back to women's, I mean, Van Klinken, she was breaking records. She was killing it for Oregon women's. They finished fourth in the NCAA tournament. And, I mean, it was great. It was a great spot for them. But, yeah, men's disappointing year. So we'd have to put, I think, just putting track and field, I think it's fair. It's fair.
I think this group would be possibly in the A tier if we were just doing the women. But
yes,
since the men are in there, only having Mekhi Williams really representing them at the NCAAs, and he finished seventh, finishing fourth in the Pac-12 championship. This is also, I think, football and them, the losing to Washington, were kind of ruining the year type tier, because I think that left a really sour taste in Oregon fans' mouth for football, and then allowing Washington in men's track and field to win their first ever league title. That one really stings. Okay, the C tier. This might seem a little unfair because we're putting both golf teams here, and they did make an NCAA tournament, but I just think the problem with those teams is that they seemed a lot better than that. During the year, it seemed like both would maybe win Pac-12 championships. They finished in the middle of the pack, and Pac-12 still made it to NCAAs. But I think in the postseason, these teams are going to look to make a little bit deeper runs, I think, in the coming years. And I think they kind of both faltered a little bit late. Oregon State women outpaced the Oregon women at the end there, and I think that left a sour taste. So all in all, not bad seasons by either golf team. I wouldn't say that at all, but also not necessarily the best seasons. Again, the women outpacing them a little bit. They finished second in the Pac-12, whereas the men finished more middle of the pack. But the women did finish 10 of 12. Might be a little unfair. Maybe the women's team should be a little bit higher, but I just feel like both teams didn't necessarily quite perform up to expectations there.
I agree. I mean, it was a quiet year for them both. I mean, they'll bounce back.
Now we get to the D tier. The D stands for disappointment.
It's 100%
for
disappointment.
Sure. These are two programs that we've come to expect great things from: Elite 8 runs, Sweet 16 runs. They both feel kind of lost in the shuffle right now, don't they?
I agree. I mean, and we're talking about Oregon men and women's basketball. I mean, two disappointing year. I mean, this is just a disappointing season. I mean, you look at Dana Altman, you look at this. I mean, they were just such an inconsistent team going for the men's. They had injuries, but I just feel like there was times where they were just never really together.
Cohesive, yeah.
Cohesiveness. I mean, you saw little glimpses of it. I mean, we saw it in the game where we actually went to go see it together, the Oregon USC game.
You got to mention that, Dan.
I have to rub it in a little bit. You know what I'm saying? But, I just feel like Oregon, they never really clicked. And like you said, you can blame injuries. You can blame all the guys coming in from the transfer portal, not really having a solid leader. You can look at Will Richardson, sure. But I just think, what we've seen in the past with this Oregon team, I mean, they can make some runs. I mean, they had that run where they beat Luka Garza at Iowa. They were one hell of a team that year. So I just think, expectations weren't met. And then you see, the fans weren't even coming to the games. They were having some pretty bad attendance. And same thing with the women's. I mean, just disappointing year for them as well.
Yeah, they never felt cohesive either.
No.
Tough guard play. Tahina Pau was very inconsistent. She's off to South Carolina. India Rogers was, of course, a bright spot. And you do obviously get Van Sluten back next year. She was a fabulous freshman. But I don't think either of these coaches were happy with their seasons at all. The women's team, they expect to make the NCAA tournament each and every year, and they did make it in 2022. And, but I think the biggest thing with the women's team, their record against elite competition, against top 25 teams, like they were kind of like 1-7, I think.
Yeah.
So that really took this team down. They didn't win a ton of big games. They had that one win against Arizona, but they didn't really move the needle in other ways. Might be a little harsh for Kelly Graves' program, but I don't think he was happy with that team.
No.
They had chemistry issues. They didn't feel together. Both teams, D for disappointment, and I think they both had chemistry issues. So just to recap, we've got volleyball all alone in the S tier, in the A tier, close to getting to that S tier. Baseball and softball, I think both programs kind of captured the imagination, got the fan base into a frenzy. The B tier, the losing to Washington tier, the men's team failing to win. They had won 15 consecutive titles, so finishing fourth I think is fair to call a disappointment. The women putting them in the B tier rather than the C tier. Football holding serve, very fitting for them. We just gave their season a B+, so they're in the B tier. It's only right. Golf might seem a little harsh, but I just felt like I expected more from these teams as they were going through the regular season, and it didn't quite pan out that way, so I put them a little bit behind track and football, and then basketball. I think two teams right now within Rob Mullen's program that are in soul-searching mode, trying to figure out what their identities are. So those are our Oregon sports rankings. I think Oregon State's going to be very interesting because less obvious to rank because they didn't really have those like super regional Elite Eight teams. That could put football pretty high.
I would say Oregon State's football S tier. I mean, what a breakout year. We'll
have
see.
to think about it. We haven't gone in the lab and crunched the numbers yet. This is very
numbers will be crunched for sure.
This is a very calculated mathematical process for both of us. It requires pulling out our abacus. Oh yeah, and let's mention teams that didn't even make any of these tiers. That's lacrosse, that parted ways with their coach, or she left, whatever it was. Very disappointing year for them, 5-12. And then Graham Abel's squad, a year after having a very solid season, really tough one. And now they lose Leah Freeman, one of the best goalkeepers in school history.
That's a huge loss.
She's off to Duke. I mean, she bailed that team out a lot. 100%. She kept that team from being even worse. A losing record. That's a program that's going to have to figure their stuff out
100%.
Pretty soon here for sure. So those are the teams that didn't even make beyond disappointment, I would say. So they're kind of at the bottom. I think this next year, Oregon's got to get a national championship. I think that's really the thing missing. I'm not sure which program. I think softball maybe could possibly get in there. Volleyball knocking on the door. We'll just have to see. All right, we'll be right back real quick. I have another really dumb rant about NCAA. I think the last time I ranted about my NCAA 14 online franchise on the Xbox 360, it got cut from that lost episode that we weren't able to do. So Danny's going to sit over here and stew in amusement while I go into some of my NCAA 14. I have a really big dilemma right now.
Let's do it.
All right. All right, welcome back. We got to get out of here soon. So keep me honest here, Danny, because this is definitely the stupidest part of the show. But I want to rant about my NCAA 14 online franchise career because I have the biggest dilemma that I've ever faced in my life right now, and I've been through multiple job hunts and college decisions. This is the biggest decision I've ever had to make in my life.
My goodness.
And it's in the virtual world. Okay. So I have been at North Texas for 4 years.
Mean Green.
The Mean Green. I've created a dynasty in Denton. I'm a Denton creating a dynasty in Denton, Texas. I have my roots there, and we built things from the ground up.
That's beautiful.
I had a great quarterback named Scooter Campbell, 6'7", Cam Newton type.
That's a quarterback name right there.
Dual threat. We won back-to-back Heismans with him.
Oh, my goodness.
We had Turn Flory. I always create him. That's like my go-to created guy, really fast scat back receiver. We won a Heisman with him in year 4 with 2,000 receiving yards and 1,000 rushing yards. So DeAnthony Thomas on steroids. DeAnthony Thomas, by the way. That's a sore spot. Maybe we'll get into that story, my DeAnthony Thomas story.
Heartbreak
a little bit
over
later
this.
on.
Yeah, heartbreak.
Maybe in the coming weeks. I don't want to get into that yet because it's too fresh. But he was DeAnthony Thomas on steroids. We won back-to-back titles. And I'm telling the group chat, most of the time when I do an online franchise, I want to move up pretty quickly to the big leagues. I'm telling my buddies I don't want to leave North Texas. We moved into the Big 12. We won back-to-back national titles in 2015 and 16. So I'm like, I'm never leaving North Texas. I'm locked in for life. Then I check my coaching offers for the next year. USC comes in, my alma mater.
Oh my God.
And I was like, no, I've already done USC. I've already done gone through the Sam Darnold era before in an online franchise previously. I'm good. 2 offers later, the Georgia Bulldogs.
Oh.
And I am in agonizing pain. I want to play games again so bad, but I've literally opened up NCAA 14 about 6 different times and sat there staring at the screen. I can't get past this roadblock because on one hand, I love my time at North Texas. I've loved, and you create the players and you get to know them, and we had a good recruiting class coming in, and I felt like we could win a 3rd straight national title. No intention of leaving, but then Georgia Bulldogs, my childhood team, they come calling, and I've never gotten an offer from them in an online franchise. They've always been too good. So what do you think? What do I do here? Do I stick with what I know? Stick with the status quo.
I feel like with North Texas, man, I mean, listen, you've gotten them the back-to-back Heismans. You've gotten them the titles. All good things must come to an end, man. I think it's time you join your childhood. Go Georgia Bulldogs, man.
Oh, dude, I think you're right. Maybe we put up a Twitter poll with this episode.
We might have to.
If I should stay loyal with the mid-major or move to Georgia. This has been such a dilemma. My friends have literally been split.
I'd lose sleep over it.
I have lost sleep over this. I want to keep playing so badly, but I kind of think you're right. Because it'll be 2017. I can recreate Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, win a national title that year, maybe right the wrongs of the Justin Fields era, and then go to Stetson Bennett. The thing is, if I go to Georgia, it's done. I'm not making another coaching change my entire time, and maybe I'll see North Texas in the national title. So Danny says that I should go to Georgia. A lot of my friends are saying that. A lot of them are saying North Texas, so we'll put a little Twitter poll. But no reason to keep going on that. We'll wrap up this episode.
Yes, sir.
We always hit that 34-minute mark, but hope you're enjoying the podcast, our Oregon tiers rankings. Congrats to Wyndham Clark. We'll be back next week with a very special surprise. We're going to feature Hayden Herrera, my sports director, on the show in a very fun and exciting way. Any last words to say? We'll leave it there.
I'm at a loss of words.
See you next week.